today will give you the opportunity to explore that. One of the things I need to do is to thank also Mary Lou Suarez and the two research associates. These things don't happen by accident, but the fact that Georgia Tech can help be a convener and to find a way in which we can have various parts. You think about transatlantic communications, I think about trans-campus communications. My school is all the way to hell on the other side, the west part of this campus, and this is all the way on the east side. So we refer to being the Gulf, the Great Divider being the expressway between us. But what's happening here at Georgia Tech is really quite remarkable. And I attribute that directly to the level of efforts and the level of competence of the people that are part of this. The bios of our principal speakers are all on the program, so I'm not going to repeat that. But I want you to know that I consider it a special treat to have the opportunity to welcome you here and to tell you that I hope this program produces the kind of rich dialogue and, frankly, some understanding and perhaps some to-dos that might be useful. So with that, I'll introduce Peter, who I think is Alasdair is going to go first. Alasdair is a member of our faculty and is the Jean Monnet Professor here, supported by the European Union, and is the director of our Jean Monnet Center. So, Alasdair.
Yeah, so those I didn't meet last night. I'm Alasdair Young. I look forward to meeting you during the day. I am very much the junior partner in this operation, sidekick, maybe the comedy relief. My interest, so I'm involved in this because directing our Center for European and Transatlantic Studies, which is the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence and is supported by the European Union. I'm obliged to say at this point that nothing that you hear here today, no matter how brilliant or insightful, can in any way be attributed to the European Commission.
I agree with that.
That's a legal obligation. It's a legal obligation. So that's
you made my day.
So anyway, so we're delighted to have so many of you who've come from so far. This is not my area. I'm interested in transatlantic relations. I do trade and regulatory policy. I tend to do stuff on goods. When we were putting together the proposal for the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence in 2014, Peter and I thought something interesting was going to be happening because we had the Edward Snowden revelations, we had the General Border Protection Regulation coming along. So we thought there'd be a need to think about what would replace safe harbor. So that's what we told the Commission we were going to do. Unfortunately, Max Schrems and the Court of Justice came along and kind of sped up that process faster than we could go. Joe likes to talk about academic time. And we weren't nimble enough to actually get in ahead of that. And the Commission is quite literal. So they don't like you to do something completely different. So we thought this was a topic that dealt with the same issues. And how do you deal with differences in privacy, how privacy is regulated in different jurisdictions that are constantly interacting in different ways, this time a bit more with a focus on commerce and counterterrorism than on commerce. But the idea of interaction still holds. And so that was sort of the genesis of this particular formulation. So I'm coming in with a really low knowledge bar. So I'm really looking forward to learning a lot about this very important issue. A couple of pieces of housekeeping. We're going to have the first panel session here, and then we'll be going across to the Scheller Business School across the road for Bruno Gencarelli's keynote lecture. So there'll be a little bit of walking required, not too much. And then we'll be coming back here for lunch. And the other thing is, once we get back after Peter's presentation, we go back to the conference slide, you will see a hashtag for the conference. So if you happen to be tweeting about us, what's going on here, please use that hashtag. Okay, without further ado, I don't think I can introduce Peter, right? Everybody knows Peter, which is why you're here. That's just the fantastic thing about working with Peter. I have to say, this has been a fantastic experience for me working with Peter. He's been very generous with his time. It's always fascinating to hear his stories, always carefully appropriate, I suppose. Anyway, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Peter Swire, who's the real animator of this meeting.
Thank you. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted this day has come, and lots of you were at the dinner last night, and that was a great pleasure. Alasdair, as he said, we put together this funding proposal about 3 years ago, and really thought there'd be something happening in privacy, and I think all of us who work in this area would agree that's happened. It's hard to predict the exact details. A couple of logistical things. We're live streaming this, and so when you come up on a panel today, we're going to be asking you to sign this. I did send out notes ahead of time saying if you had an objection, let us know, and no one objected, so I hope that will all work. As I think you also know, Lawfare plan is to have a online symposium version of the things for those who want to do that. Susan Hennessy's here, she'll be on the panel later this morning. And we're asking for drafts a week from today. The idea is if you're working on this, you can be thinking about it all day, you can be working on it. And while it's fresh in your mind, you can have a Lawfare size post on. So that's a way to sort of build on the things we're thinking about and talking about today and try to make it concrete in a short time. So if you're going to do that, and I hope many of you will, that's the timeline. As Joe Bankoff said, when the Schrems case came down, he not only got me to speak about it about 48 hours after the Schrems case, but he told me I had a personal moral responsibility to speak up on the issue. And I thought I was pretty busy already doing other things. That tends to happen to me, as some of you know. And I thought about it, and then having worked on national security issues, law enforcement, and also privacy in Europe, sort of took what Joe said to heart. And so a lot of my last couple of years, in many ways, has been Joe guilting me into working on these issues. So thank you so much, Joe, for wrecking your life for the last couple of years. I'm sorry. The printed programs, there was a glitch this morning. They're going to be coming, so you'll be reminded of whom all the other wonderful people are who are speaking on the panels. So now I'm going to just go through an introduction. It'll take 10 minutes or 12 minutes or something like that, of how I see the issues we're working on. Let's see how it is. Like that? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to say thank you. We're going to talk about technology changes. We're going to talk about who's involved in mutual legal assistance, which is a lot of the work I've been doing, though it intersects with various topics you all are doing. Talking about the role of treaties versus other things. Talking about how each country thinks is wonderful and prefers its own system. And then we'll walk through who the panel will be. So since the beginning of 2015, we've had a project here on cross-border requests for data. There's now a website page you can see at the Institute for Information Security and Privacy. The financial support's listed in the program. We have a lot of people who are here who've been supportive. Not only the Alasdair and Jean Monnet work for the conference, Microsoft and Facebook and Google have all participated along the way in work related to this. We've had the Hewlett Foundations here today. They've been really decisive as part of their cybersecurity project and helping us do the work. And then within Georgia Tech, the Institute for Information Security and Privacy, and also the Scheller College of Business. So we have a range of people who are supporting it. In my opening remarks, I'm going to highlight some of the work we've done here at Georgia Tech, but I encourage you just to go online to all the other people speaking at this conference. Greg Nojheim and Susan and John DeLong and all the other many, I don't want to leave anybody out. Many of the people here have been writing about these issues during the thing. And so to round out the current writing on this, Andrew Woods will be here later, et cetera, refer to that. So my organizing view why I've been working on this is that there's strong reasons why these issues are going to get much bigger. They're bigger now than they were. I think even mentioning MLAT was seen as a specialty item 3 or 4 years ago. Today, for the Privacy Law Scholars Conference, they had about 12 or 14 categories of topics. One of them was mutual legal assistance, and another was cross-border requests for data. I'm not sure how those are different, but the idea that 2 of those would be on the list of topics for the Privacy Law Scholars is really very, very different from a few years ago. Here's my attempt to simplify why the technology is driving these issues. And I'm first going to make you feel sorry for law enforcement, then I'm going to make you feel sorry for privacy. Okay. So this is the slide to try to make you feel sorry for the people whose job is to try to make us safe from law enforcement. And the first thing is that they have problems with data at rest, right? So data is stored somewhere else many, many times. It's stored in the cloud. That's true for email. It's true for social network information, many other kinds of content, especially if you're, for instance, in a European country, many, many times the data that's relevant to your crime will be stored in an email held in the United States, which makes getting a typical crime solution into an international incident. And that wouldn't have been true. Think back 30 years ago. If there's a normal crime with normal suspects in communications in Paris, it would have been in France, overwhelmingly. And now, overwhelmingly, for inside a country crime, it's being held somewhere else. And so your local legal process doesn't work or may not work because, notably, US law, the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, puts that period. Okay, so that's a problem for data at rest. So there's one other way you can get data. You can get data in transit. Well, data in transit is a problem also for law enforcement. Encryption has scaled. So email today for the big webmail services is encrypted. Social networking service for the big services, it's encrypted, which means if you have content that the police want and they do a local wiretap, it doesn't work. So for the local police, it doesn't work to get the stored data. It doesn't work to get the data in transit. And so the changing technology means that the police trying to do their job with good cause to investigate a particular person run into barriers that weren't true in the same way not so long ago. And so when there's no local legal process or local wiretap, we had an article in 2012 about from real-time intercepts, that would be a wiretap, for instance, to stored records. That's the way you get content today. And it's why encryption drives the government to seek access to the cloud. So we have some major cloud providers in the room, and major cloud providers are on the line here. So every routine case can become a cross-border case. Whatever the scale was for MLATs in the early days, that which was cross-border crimes, international drug smuggling or something. Now it can be for random, whatever it is, local crime. So that's a huge technology change, and it's not going away. Okay, so now you're almost crying because you feel sorry for law enforcement. Now we're going to shift to the other perspective, which many of you have heard, and this was posted on CBT. Greg Nojohn's here back in 2011, Golden Dark versus the Golden Age of surveillance. So as law enforcement encounters these arguments, it's also, as the privacy side people here know vividly, an amazing time to do surveillance. 4 reasons. One is we have so many recorded information. I mean, how many text messages did you send 20 years ago? Plus emails, plus social networking service. Facebook is now, 11 years old, 12 years old? Or Facebook? Yeah, 11 or 12 years old. So social network at scale is that reason. And at least the metadata is available to law enforcement for this in a very wide range of cases, often content. Another thing today, as we all sort of know, if you're the police, you now have a location tracker on almost everybody's phone. That's highly useful to know where people are. It makes alibis much harder for people. There's so many other databases, financial databases, web history has been in the news recently, data brokers. And Tim Cook talked about the golden age of surveillance in his Time magazine cover story last year. And he emphasized cameras everywhere, which in some ways is the leading edge of IoT, which is sensors everywhere. So what's happening here is law enforcement is going to need evidence that's often overseas, especially for content. But law enforcement has these amazing advantages they simply didn't have 25 years ago. One way to say it is if you were the police and you could trade today's surveillance for 25 years ago, you'd love to have today's surveillance, location, content, metadata, et cetera. Okay, so law enforcement sees the world getting much worse. That was the previous slide. Privacy is seeing the world getting much worse. That's this slide. And so we're in that happy academic moment where it's just worse for everybody. And all we have to do now is figure out how to fix it. So who cares about mutual legal assistance? People in this room and others. Justin Hemmings is here. Justin, raise your hand. This was the first article that came out in our research series, which was stakeholders in the reform of the global system for mutual legal assistance. Obviously, law enforcement cares, privacy folks. Tech companies care because you all get the requests, but also other government and public interests are involved. So one of the simplest ways to solve all this is to just have a data center in every country so the police can go to the local data center. 200 countries, let's have 200 data centers at least. Every little country, Belgium has its own data center, et cetera. Well, that's not a great view of the internet the way we thought of the internet, which was the amazing ability to go international across borders with sort of freedom and often with anonymity. So that sort of possibly anonymous and often not local internet is put at risk because police want to find some way to get the data at home. So that's who cares about this issue. Is mutual legal assistance treaty, is MLAT the answer? We've had MLATs for, I think the 1970s was a heavy increase in the amount of MLATs. But they're slow to update and they're slow to respond to changing technology. Bertrand de la Chapelle couldn't be here today. He's leading a project from Paris on data and internet jurisdiction. They're working on alternatives, but it's much more than a bilateral problem. Mutual legal assistance is not just us in one country. We need a global or much wider than narrow set. So one of the other early articles we had here with Justin is mutual legal assistance in an era of globalized communications. And a lot of you have heard us say this, the analogy to the visa waiver program. Visa waiver says you don't need a statute, write one statute, put in strict criteria, and this is the US-UK agreement as an example of this. And then if you have a good statute for what counts about how we cooperate, you then can have smoother things with those countries. An extension of that idea that Devin Desai's here, Devin back, we just put on Lawfare this winter, is maybe you don't have a whole country that you're ready to do it with. So if India is a very big place with over 1 billion people and a highly variable legal system, state by state, maybe you could have a single point of contact, a specialized office, and requests from that office could get the better procedures, the streamlined procedures. So you don't have to trust the whole country. You can have an easy to monitor subset of requests. So these are sort of institutional possibilities for speeding up the process, having ways to handle the problem. One thing, that's true in many, many areas is each country prefers its own system. So how do we achieve law enforcement consistent with privacy, manageable for the companies? And the thing here is that there's been a sort of distrust of other systems, often for very good reasons. So is DeBray in the room? DeBray Kennedy Mayo, a co-author on the Emory Law Journal article listed here. And it's about how both Europe and the US are stricter than each other for the privacy of government requests. Notably, from the United States side, we have probable cause. You need an independent judge who's not part of law enforcement. So we're very proud of probable cause, so we're stricter. And notably for Europe, Europe has the comprehensive data protection regime and the US doesn't. And so each side has reason to think that sharing with the others is giving up its cherished values. So how can you compromise your cherished values to an inferior system? The thing to note here is each side thinks the other side is inferior, which makes it harder to come to some agreement. And then as part of this, working with Suzanne Mignot, Suzanne, you see we've had a team working here at Georgia Tech. Suzanne's at Paris 2 studying comparative data protection law. We looked at France in detail. UK's gotten a lot of the attention. We use France as a case study. And so she has a chapter called Understanding the French Criminal Justice System as a tool for reforming international legal cooperation and cross-border requests. And then she, with Justin and I, did a mutual legal assistance case study for the US and France, which is published in Wisconsin International Law Journal. So this is an attempt to have sort of a case study that shows how each country, US and France, has things it doesn't trust about the other. And if you're going to get to some agreement at all, you have to bridge that somehow. So here's the outline of today's conference, and then we'll move into the first panel. So the first panel is an area that I'm fascinated by. It'll be a 75-minute panel, which is mutual legal assistance about law enforcement sharing. Law enforcement includes crimes like terrorism. Well, other people care about terrorism besides police officers. For instance, the national security agencies do. And so in the United States, we have this very clear set of criminal law authorities, and then we have a different set of FISA, national intelligence authorities, and we have a U.S. distinction about which is which. And in addition, we have allies in the world. I hope that continues over time. And so there's military cooperation, such as in NATO. And we have the former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, General Breedlove, here today to talk about this. And so there's a tremendous amount of information sharing against anti-terrorism, which goes over towards nation states or the things that look sort of like nation states. And so how does the information sharing about the threats work across these different domains? In US law, Title 18 is law enforcement, Title 10 is military, Title 50 is intelligence. Those different authorities are well defined. In Europe, in different countries, I was talking to Bruno Giancarelli yesterday about this, the line between law enforcement and national security is different in different countries. So if you're going to have law enforcement sharing, it might be this broad for law enforcement in one country and this broad for another. And then how do you have the other regime of intelligence sharing? So to the extent there's going to be facing the threats and a legal regime that makes sense, defining the boundaries of these is going to be super important. I've not been able to find out there discussions about this. And so I feel it's something this conference is doing to help forward that discussion. Our keynote, as you know, we have Bruno Giancarelli from the European Commission, a senior official on data protection with multiple responsibilities. He'll be giving our keynote, and thank you very much for being here. And the keynote is called Achieving Individual Privacy and International Security Cooperation in a Shifting Landscape. His office in DG Justice has responsibilities on both sides, the privacy and security, and these are the things we're struggling with. And with that, we're going to have two commenters for the panel. Susan Hennessy and Andrew Woods are going to comment here. Panel two, so then that will, as we heard earlier, we're going to walk across the street for that, not one walk across the street for the keynote. Panel two is a technology panel. I've suggested changing technology drives change. That's a feature of a lot of the issues we work on. And we have experts on attribution for hacking. You can only get legal process for somebody if you find out this is the bad guy. So how do we find out it's the bad guy? We're going to have discussions about data breach investigations and the shifting incentives of people when we are trying to get attribution. And we're going to have some new data and some new research that's starting about how much is this internationalization really true. So we're trying to build up some technological facts that underpin the policy. Panel three will focus especially on this US-UK agreement that was announced last summer, which is a variation on some of the sorts of things that Jen Daskell, Andrew Woods, myself, others have talked about as a sort of visa waiver or other similar thing. In some ways, that's a particular reform proposal on the table. And then panel four will be longer term proposals. To the extent we're on an arc of change, and to the extent that one proposal might not be the whole thing or might not even happen, how do we get out of this mess? So to wrap up, do I have a conclusion? We do have a conclusion. So there's increasing technological pressures to adjust data sharing. And it's partly due to the barriers that good faith law enforcement just doing their job need data they can't get because it's data at rest and data in transit is blocked. There's a growing recognition that we have to address these issues. And I personally am very happy to get to this day, very happy it didn't rain last night. And happy that we're going to have our day's discussion and look forward to continuing.